it's an enormous pleasure to meet you, even if it has to be electronically, Silvana. As the chair and the co-founder of the European Leadership Network, it's an opportunity to welcome you as a member of the network and to express my personal pleasure that you accepted our invitation to join. So we're thrilled to have you as a member. You're a significant political leader, having held the offices of member and of vice president, in fact, of the European Parliament. You're also the founder of Women Political Leaders, an organisation which has the very obvious aim to increase the number and influence of women in political leadership roles. You believe that convening women who are already political leaders can drive positive change and accelerate the impact and visibility of women in leadership, and I agree that that's the right aim, and that is what will happen. So the ELN also believes in the power of networks to affect change. We work to achieve progress on common political and security challenges, and to give Europe the diversity of its voice in the transatlantic space. There is an obvious gender imbalance in the defence and security sector, particularly at the top. Progress is possible, and there are good examples of that, but we shouldn't be complacent. The ELN recognises our own gender imbalance, both in the board that we have, and in our network memberships, and we're working hard to redress this issue. But progress is slow, so working with the WPL, we want to improve our performance in that regard. So in this interview, my opening question is, recognizing that both of these organizations' strength lies in high-level networks with a membership committed to improving dialogue and achieving political impact, that we should learn from each other at WPL. How do you champion women as political leaders? And how do you get others, including women, to understand why this is important?
Well, let me start, Des, by saying that I highly appreciate your invitation to join the ELN. It's a huge privilege and honor to be part of such a distinguished and important group of leaders, and especially at a time when Europe is once more confronted with a lot of hopes and expectations, and multilateralism as such is also slightly put under a stress test. I think networks like the ones that you co-founded are hugely and tremendously important. And indeed, as you said, traditionally, way too few women have been visible or active or part of the security or foreign affairs spheres of policy. And so I really want to applaud you for your special initiative to include more women in this network. Thank you for that, and thank you for the broader picture that you're also pursuing to complete. Now, to your question, what are we doing at WPL? Indeed, you already mentioned our mission, which means that we want more women in political leadership positions, because it's also about what's the norm. What do you think, for example, if you're asked, think of president and close your eyes while doing that, does a woman come to your mind, or is it a man? The traditional picture is probably not the female president. Actually, the first ever elected woman president is still alive, which shows that it's a rather new phenomenon. So changing the norms, changing what's normal by bringing women into that picture is one of the big missions. And the other one is that it also really matters what kind of positions do women then hold. Is it the, of course, very important Ministry for Family Affairs, or is it Ministry for Defense and Security or Foreign Affairs? There is a difference, and that needs to also be addressed, that it's not traditional male areas of policy making and traditional female one. And what we found is that basically we call it the 3 magic C's, what women need. That's community, the networking that you already addressed, that also communication, that women are as much heard and as much seen as their male counterparts, which is in politics, you know yourself, always a race and a competition for attention. And then finally also the community that really relying on each other. So connection, communication, and community, we think are main elements that help in promoting this pursuit of having more women in influential positions and also in politics as such.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting that you should say, you know, when you close your eyes and think of leaders, you know, if you think of presidents or prime ministers, who comes to mind? I mean, doing that in these circumstances, for lots of people, it won't necessarily be a man, for a reason that I'm about to come to. You know, these are unique circumstances. So for the first time in our lives, and in fact, I think probably for the first time in most people that are alive today in their lives, one of these low probability, high impact events that people talk about in security terms and have done for some time has happened. And, you know, it has tested the resilience of the way in which we live, and we have failed because it has fundamentally changed the way we all live. And in many ways, in those changes, the people have been ahead of their leadership, you know, changing in advance. Certainly where I live, you know, people were locking themselves down long before anybody was asking them to be locked down. Anyway, so the pandemic is presenting these changes and testing leadership. And this crisis, it's striking how many female leaders, you know, Jacinda Ardern, you know, principally comes to mind. Angela Merkel comes to mind. You know, Erna Solberg, and closer to home, Nicola Sturgeon, who leads the devolved Scottish government, to name just a few of them, have enjoyed comparative success in dealing with the communication of the problems of this issue and, you know, in the way in which they've handled it. So to what extent do you think, from your perspective as a woman and as the leader of this very significant organization, the WPL, to what extent do you think this can be explained by the way women exercise power and show leadership? You know, is it unique to their gender? And, you know, how do we project them as good examples to other women and indeed to men, maybe in some circumstances to change their behavior? And do you think they're getting sufficient credit for it? Do you think it's known well enough?
Well, let me say three things on that. One is it's indeed a unique situation which offers unique opportunity. And Winston Churchill allegedly said, never waste a good crisis. So also this one shouldn't be wasted in terms of making, pointing out the role that women leaders have positively played and which might change stereotypes and perceptions significantly. The second thing is, you were already listing almost all the names of the female leaders that there are, right? So 93% of the world's presidents, prime ministers are men, which means that the few examples that we have are usually already then making headlines just by being where they are. Just imagine a world where 50-50 would be female, male leaders, right? Which could be a very, very different one. So the examples are phenomenal, great, but it's very few. And thirdly, the chair of our board, Helen Clark, a former Prime Minister of New Zealand, she pointed out that for her, the critical difference between the leadership that was shown in this pandemic between women and men is that most women were much higher on empathy. She doesn't say men don't have that empathy, but there was the female leaders who consulted children for how does lockdown daily life look for them? What is it that they're missing? What should leaders take into account when they take decisions for children? It was the Prime Minister of Norway or the Prime Minister of Iceland. She launched a nationwide competition that between 8 and 9 p.m. at home, one should not talk about the pandemic, just to know there is life before, after, and during this pandemic. but one shouldn't just get absorbed into what then causes all those mental health problems. So this empathy, I think, is probably something that is very, very much said to be a strong one that women leaders can display.
Yeah, I mean, I've observed close at hand Nicola Sturgeon operate because she gives this daily press conference, and I wouldn't so much say from her point of view it's empathy, but she just talks in a different way, you know, than the predominantly male politicians who do the UK press conferences daily do. She just talks in a different way. It's a much more accessible way, and it's a much, and also I think it's a much more honest way. I mean, when she doesn't know something, she doesn't pretend she does. She doesn't feel obliged to. So, you know, I mean, there definitely is something there that either is in the way in which women move up the ladder in politics or whatever they do. But of course, you have to remember that I lived through Margaret Thatcher's prime ministership. It's not the same about all women. So I wanted to turn just to, you know, how we, so it's not a shortage of women that's the problem here. You know, I mean, I work in organizations which have a very significant female staff membership, you know, and in one case, you know, an organization, an NGO in the United States, which is 70% women, including in its leadership. So this question is designed to see how we can break these barriers that get women to the top. So let's go back to defence and security, because this is historically sort of male dominated. Increasingly women, in my observation, and in particular younger women, are active and influential in this area. Most of the organizations I work with have high percentages of women analysts, women researchers, women contributors, but those that reach the highest levels are too few, and they tend to be overcommitted as gender champions, which I think is part of the problem we have about recruiting them to our network. So what can our respective organizations do better to support women and younger women to get to those levels, better to support women who are leaders, and how better to support younger women to get to those levels?
In politics, as you know very, very well, it's a lot about getting the recognition and the visibility, and which is a key factor in order to be able to move ahead. Of course, building on knowledge, capacity, and ability. So organizations like yours and ours, what we can definitely do is elevate women leaders who might not be in the sort of database of the usual suspects who get invited to speak at international fora. For example, at the Munich Security Conference, one of the main gatherings for security, for the security community, there are now significant efforts made in the past few years to find women as speakers, and still there are a lot of names which, let's say, in our network, we would be, women political leaders, we would be aware of, that they could be great contributors, which are just not part of the mainstream speaker database, if I can say that. And OECD, another organization that one can't call a feminist organization, but they made it one of their principles to have parity in speakers at the conferences that they can influence. Now, if the ministerial meetings are, they have the ministers that are sent by the member countries, but so these kind of efforts to elevate women to very visible role, to give them recognition, public perception, and public appearances, that's what networks like yours, like ours, can do for women that are in leadership positions already, but who want and are capable of doing this, the step to the highest echelons.
Yeah, I mean, there's an opportunity for me to share some of my own experiences. I no longer appear on panels that are not gender balanced. So, and I'm quite often invited to chair panels. And I love doing it because invariably when you get to the question time, men put their hands up and women are reluctant to put their hands up for some reason at the beginning. So I quite often allow 2 or 3 men to ask a question. And then I tell the audience at the beginning of this that until there is gender parity now, nobody else is going to speak. So 3 women now need to ask questions, and from then on it will be man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, you know. And I'm surprised actually how receptive audiences are, including men, to this, apart from those that want that to be the next question, and you know, they're all usually a bit annoyed. But I think there are small things you can do that can advance this. So we're kind of running out of time here. So I just want to move on to a question that is particularly relevant, I think, to where we are. So this pandemic is convincing evidence, if ever it was needed, you know, that we're all interconnected and that we must all, and I mean all, across the whole world, work together to ensure our collective security. There's no question about that. So whether it be health or climate or military challenges, how can cooperation in common security threats be improved? You know, and what roles can the WPL and the ELN play in improving that cooperation?
International collaboration and cooperation now is more crucial than ever. I mean, as you described, the pandemic doesn't stop because there is a border or because on the one side of the fence there is another language spoken and on the other. It's really affecting everybody. But at the same time, we see that the international institutions that we have in place, like United Nations or like WHO, are under considerable attack, are questioned in their what can they deliver. G20 has also tried to step up in a certain way, but the current existing infrastructure of institutions is put into question. And I think networks like yours and ours can make sure that people across borders, across political affiliation, continue cooperating and talking to each other. And this international thinking and international collaboration spirit, that this is held up high and as a value. And that by thriving in those smaller networks, that this can then have they get the spirit and maybe hopefully a spillover effect into the institutions by realizing that collaboration and cooperation is what gets us further, and that this is the sort of ground thinking and spirit that we can contribute to.
Okay,